I'm Sarah Martinez, 34 years old. And last month I walked into my bedroom to find my husband of 12 years in bed with my best friend Jessica. What would you do if you discovered the two people you trusted most had been betraying you for months? Before I tell you how I made them both regret ever crossing me, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved. My name is Sarah Martinez, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how the worst betrayal of my life became the greatest victory I could have ever imagined. I'm 34 years old, and I'm currently worth $3.2 million. But this story didn't start that way. Everything began at Boston University, where I was studying computer engineering while David was in business school. We met in a crowded campus cafe where he asked to share my table because there were no empty seats. I was working on a coding project, completely absorbed in my laptop screen, when this confident, charming guy sat down across from me. "What are you working on?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Just a small web application," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Business major here, but what you're doing looks way more interesting than my marketing textbooks." David was everything I wasn't: outgoing, socially confident, and naturally charismatic. I was the quiet, technically minded girl who preferred solving problems with code rather than small talk. Somehow we complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. Our first real conversation lasted 3 hours. David told me I was brilliant but too shy, that I needed to put myself out there more. "You have so much potential, Sarah, but you're hiding it from the world." Jessica entered my life during my second semester. She was also in computer engineering, but 2 years ahead of me. The first time I saw her in the lab, she commanded attention: tall, blonde, blue-eyed, always impeccably dressed, and intimidatingly competent with technology. "You're the new sophomore, right?" she asked, approaching my workstation with the confidence of someone who owned the place. "Yes, Sarah Martinez," I said nervously. "Jessica Thompson. I've been the top performer in this lab for 2 years running, so let me give you some advice if you want to survive here." Jessica was everything I aspired to be: organized where I was chaotic. Socially adept where I was awkward, confident where I was uncertain. She seemed to have it all figured out, and for some reason she took me under her wing. During our university years, the three of us became inseparable. David would constantly tell me, "If you were more social like Jessica, you'd be unstoppable." Jessica would say, "If you were more business-minded like David, you'd go so much further." They were always trying to improve me, shape me into their vision of what I should become. Looking back now, I realize they were both subtly undermining my confidence while building themselves up as the ones who knew better. But at the time, I was grateful for their guidance and friendship. After graduation, we all took different paths. David landed a prestigious job at a major marketing firm in Boston. Jessica moved to San Francisco to work for a tech giant. I decided to go freelance as a software developer, a decision that both of them questioned extensively. "Why don't you get a safe corporate job?" David asked. "Freelancing is so unstable." "You'd learn so much more at a big company," Jessica added. "You're limiting yourself." But I wanted freedom. I wanted to build something of my own, even if it meant taking risks. David and I maintained a long-distance relationship after graduation, and despite the challenges, we made it work. Jessica and I stayed in regular contact too, sharing our career struggles and victories. After 2 years, David and I decided to get married. Our wedding was beautiful, with Jessica as my maid of honor. The three of us were so happy that day, celebrating what felt like the beginning of our adult lives together. David and I rented a small house in Boston, and I set up a home office to run my freelance business. The first few years of marriage were genuinely good. David was climbing the corporate ladder, earning a solid salary and building his reputation in marketing. I was slowly building my client base, working with small businesses and startups to develop their web presence and software solutions. But even then, I noticed certain patterns. David always wanted the final say on our major financial decisions. "I'm earning more, and I have more business experience," he'd say whenever I questioned his choices. Initially, this seemed reasonable since his salary was indeed larger than my irregular freelance income. When Jessica visited from San Francisco, which happened more frequently than I expected, David always seemed slightly uncomfortable when she shared her success stories. "Jessica's just lucky," he'd mutter after she left. "Big tech companies throw money at people. It's different in my industry." I also noticed that whenever I had a particularly good month or landed a significant client, both David and Jessica would find ways to minimize my achievements. "That's great, but freelancing is still unpredictable," David would say. "You never know when the work might dry up." In late 2017, David's company started experiencing financial difficulties. There were rumors of layoffs, and David became increasingly stressed about his job security. When I suggested I could take on more clients to increase our household income, he brushed off my offer. "Just focus on your little projects," he said dismissively. "My department will turn things around." Around the same time, Jessica announced she was considering moving back to Boston. "The tech scene here is growing," she said during one of her visits. "Plus, I miss being close to my best friends." "That would be amazing," I said enthusiastically. "We could see each other all the time." David agreed, though I noticed he seemed particularly interested in the idea of Jessica living nearby. In early 2018, Jessica made the move to Boston, renting a beautiful apartment in Cambridge, just 20 minutes from our house. She landed a lucrative position at a major tech consulting firm, and suddenly our dynamic shifted. Jessica's presence in Boston transformed our social life. Instead of being a couple, we became a trio. Weekend brunches, movie nights, dinner parties, Jessica was always there. David seemed to enjoy her company immensely, often engaging in long conversations about business and technology while I worked on client projects. This period coincided with my freelance business hitting its stride. I had developed a steady client base and was earning about 60% of David's salary, which I considered a significant achievement. However, David continued to position himself as the primary breadwinner, often referring to my work as supplemental income. Jessica encouraged me to be more active on social media to promote my business. "You're doing amazing work, Sarah, but no one knows about it," she said. "You need to build your personal brand." Following her advice, I started sharing my projects on LinkedIn and Twitter, writing about technology trends and showcasing my work. This online presence brought me new clients and opportunities, but David's response was lukewarm. "Social media stuff is fine for networking," he said, "but real business development happens through traditional channels." It was around this time that I stumbled upon something that would change my life forever: cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. As a software developer, I was fascinated by the technical innovation behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. The more I researched, the more convinced I became that this was the future of finance and technology. When I excitedly shared my discoveries with David and Jessica, their reactions were immediate and dismissive. "Sarah, that's all hype and speculation," David said with a condescending laugh. "Those aren't real investments, they're basically gambling." Jessica nodded in agreement. "David's right. I've seen too many people lose money on that stuff. You should stick to what you know." But I couldn't shake my fascination with the technology. I spent my evenings reading white papers, analyzing different projects, and trying to understand the broader implications of decentralized finance. While David watched TV, I was educating myself about what I believed would be the biggest technological shift of our lifetime. In the fall of 2018, a former client contacted me about consulting on a small blockchain project. The payment structure was interesting. They offered to pay half in traditional currency and half in the project's tokens. When I mentioned this opportunity to David and Jessica, they were horrified. "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "Take the cash and run. Those tokens will be worthless in 6 months." "Sarah, you're being way too emotional about this," Jessica added. "Make the smart, logical choice." That night, I lay awake thinking about their advice. David and Jessica always counseled the safe path, the conventional wisdom. But maybe safe wasn't always right. Maybe extraordinary success required extraordinary risks. I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to take the tokens, but I wasn't going to tell David about it. The next day, I set up my first cryptocurrency wallet, a completely private account that only I could access. This wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself that I could make independent financial decisions without constant criticism and second-guessing. I accepted the consulting project and took $3,000 worth of tokens as partial payment. To avoid suspicion, I deposited the cash portion into our joint account as usual. David had no idea that I had just started building a secret financial empire. Initially, my decision looked like a mistake. The tokens lost value over the first few months, dropping to about $2,000. Thank God I didn't tell David, I thought. But I wasn't discouraged. I continued researching the technology and the broader cryptocurrency market, convinced that I was witnessing the early stages of a financial revolution. In early 2019, the market began to recover. My $3,000 investment grew to $8,000, then $12,000. I had made $9,000 without David or Jessica knowing anything about it. More importantly, I had proven to myself that my instincts were right. This success motivated me to learn more and invest more strategically. I began allocating small portions of my freelance income to carefully researched cryptocurrency investments. Every month, I would put aside $500 to $1,000 for my secret portfolio, while continuing to contribute to our household expenses from my remaining income. You seem really focused on work lately, Jessica observed during one of our dinner gatherings. Business must be going well. It is, I replied simply, not elaborating on my crypto investments. David had similar observations. Sarah's always on her laptop in the evenings now, he told Jessica. She's really dedicated to her projects. What they didn't know was that I was spending those evening hours analyzing market trends, researching new projects, and carefully building my portfolio. While they relaxed with Netflix, I was constructing my financial independence. By summer 2019, my secret account had grown to $25,000. This represented half of David's annual salary, accumulated in just over a year of careful investing. The irony wasn't lost on me. David, who prided himself on being our financial leader, had no idea that his wife was quietly outperforming his earning power. Around this time, I began noticing subtle changes in David and Jessica's relationship. They started having more private conversations, often stopping abruptly when I entered the room. Jessica began visiting more frequently, sometimes staying for dinner multiple times per week. I just love spending time with you guys, she would say. You're like family to me. David seemed particularly animated when Jessica was around, engaging her in long discussions about business and current events. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was happy that my husband and best friend got along so well. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March 2020, everything changed. David started working from home, which meant he was around constantly. This created both opportunities and challenges for managing my secret investments. On one hand, David's presence made it more difficult to research and trade cryptocurrencies without detection. On the other hand, the pandemic triggered the most dramatic cryptocurrency bull run in history, creating unprecedented opportunities for wealth creation. Look at these Bitcoin prices, David said one evening while watching the news. I wish we had bought some last year. We still could, I suggested casually. It's not too late. No way, he replied. It's way too expensive now. We missed the boat. If only he knew that I had already caught several boats and was sailing toward financial freedom while he remained anchored to his conventional thinking. During the pandemic lockdowns, Jessica started spending even more time at our house. I'm going stir-crazy alone in my apartment, she explained. You two are my social bubble. David welcomed her visits enthusiastically. Of course you should come over, he'd say. We love having you here. The three of us fell into a routine of shared meals, movie nights, and long conversations about the changing world. Sometimes Jessica would even sleep over in our guest room. I appreciated the company and the break from my intense work schedule. By summer 2020, my cryptocurrency portfolio had exploded to over $100,000. David's entire annual salary was sitting in my secret account, earning returns that his traditional investments couldn't match. The cryptocurrency market was experiencing mainstream adoption, with major corporations and institutional investors finally recognizing its legitimacy. Your freelance business is really thriving this year, David observed. The pandemic has been good for digital services. Yes, I've been fortunate, I replied, which was true in ways he couldn't imagine. Jessica often commented on my work ethic. Sarah is so disciplined, she'd tell David. She's always working on something new while we're just watching TV. What she didn't realize was that I was building wealth at a pace that would have shocked both of them. Every evening that they thought I was working on client projects, I was actually managing investments that would soon make me financially independent. By fall 2020, my portfolio had reached $200,000. I was officially worth more than David's net worth, including his 401k and our shared assets. Yet neither my husband nor my best friend had any idea. During this period, I began noticing changes in David and Jessica's behavior that made me uncomfortable. David started being more secretive with his phone, often taking calls in another room and claiming they were work-related. Jessica seemed less interested in our one-on-one conversations, preferring to engage with David about topics I couldn't contribute to. You two always seem to have so much to talk about, I mentioned one evening. We just have similar perspectives on business, David replied quickly. Jessica understands the corporate world in a way that's helpful. I didn't think much of it at the time, but these small interactions were building a pattern that would soon become impossible to ignore. The beginning of 2021 marked the most explosive period in cryptocurrency history. Bitcoin reached $60,000, Ethereum soared past $4,000, and smaller cryptocurrencies were delivering returns that seemed almost impossible. My portfolio, carefully diversified across multiple promising projects, was growing at an unprecedented rate. By March 2021, I had reached $400,000 in my secret account. This was more than 5 times David's annual salary and more than the value of our house. I was technically a multimillionaire when including our shared assets, but David remained completely unaware of my individual wealth. I really wish we had gotten into cryptocurrency, David said constantly. We could have made so much money. You could still invest now, I'd suggest, knowing he would reject the idea. It's too late, the prices are too high. We should have started years ago. The irony was almost unbearable. While David regretted missing opportunities that were still available to him, I was sitting on wealth that exceeded his wildest dreams. During this time, Jessica seemed unusually interested in my mood and behavior. You seem really happy lately, Sarah, she observed one evening. Any particular reason? Just feeling good about life, I replied truthfully, though I couldn't share the real source of my confidence. David and Jessica's friendship was also deepening in ways that made me slightly uncomfortable. They would often text each other during the day, sharing articles and having conversations that continued when Jessica came over for dinner. Sometimes I'd catch them looking at something on David's phone together, and they'd quickly close it when I approached. What are you two always looking at? I asked one evening. Just work stuff, David said. Jessica's been helping me understand some new marketing technologies. By May 2021, my portfolio had reached $600,000 that neither my husband nor my best friend knew existed. The wealth was intoxicating, but the secrecy was becoming a burden. I wanted to share my success with someone, but I knew that revealing my investments would lead to criticism, demands for control, and probably arguments about why I hadn't told them earlier. It was around this time that David's behavior became more obviously suspicious. He started going out more frequently in the evenings, claiming he was meeting work colleagues or going to the gym. Jessica, coincidentally, also seemed to have more evening commitments and was less available for our usual hangouts. One night, David received a text message while we were watching TV together. The notification showed, "Jay, are we still on for tonight?" I only saw it for a second before David quickly grabbed his phone, but my heart started racing. Who was that? I asked casually. Just someone from work, David replied, not meeting my eyes. About a project we're working on. What kind of project needs evening meetings? I pressed. It's complicated. Nothing you'd be interested in. That dismissive response bothered me more than I wanted to admit. When had David started having work projects that I wouldn't be interested in? And why did the message come from someone saved as Jay in his phone? Later that evening, David announced he was going out. "Work emergency," he said. "Might be late." After he left, I found myself replaying the text message in my mind. Jay could be anyone: John, James, Jennifer. But something about David's nervous energy and quick explanations felt wrong. On impulse, I decided to follow him. Following your own husband is not something I ever imagined myself doing, but instinct told me that something was seriously wrong. I waited 10 minutes after David left, then got in my car and drove toward downtown Boston, where he claimed his work emergency was located. Instead of going to his office building, David drove directly to Jessica's apartment complex in Cambridge. I parked across the street and watched as he went inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. There had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Jessica was having some kind of emergency and needed David's help. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. But when David emerged 2.5 hours later, any innocent explanations evaporated. Jessica walked him to his car, and I watched in horror as they embraced and kissed, not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a passionate romantic kiss between two people who were clearly in love. I sat in my car shaking as the two most important people in my life revealed their betrayal. My husband of 12 years and my best friend of 15 years had been carrying on an affair, probably for months, while I remained completely oblivious. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying the image of them kissing, trying to convince myself that I had misunderstood what I saw, but there was no misunderstanding. David and Jessica were having an affair, and I was the fool who had trusted them both completely. When I got home, David hadn't returned yet. I sat in our living room, surrounded by photos of our life together, our wedding, vacations, holidays with Jessica always included as our honorary family member. Everything felt like a lie. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, to demand explanations and fight for my marriage. But then I remembered my secret cryptocurrency portfolio, now worth over $600,000. If David knew about that money, he could potentially claim half of it in a divorce. Worse, if I revealed it now in an emotional confrontation, I would lose the strategic advantage it represented. I forced myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. I needed to gather evidence, understand the full scope of their betrayal, and plan my next moves carefully. Most importantly, I needed to protect the financial independence I had worked so hard to build. That night, I didn't sleep at all. When David came home around midnight, I pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed beside me, and I had to use every ounce of self-control not to scream at him. "How was your work emergency?" I asked the next morning, testing his willingness to lie directly to my face. "Boring but necessary," he replied smoothly. "Just database issues that needed immediate attention." The ease with which he lied confirmed what I already knew. This affair had been going on for some time, and David had become comfortable deceiving me. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I started paying careful attention to David and Jessica's interactions, documenting their suspicious behavior, and preparing for the possibility of divorce proceedings. David had become more secretive with his phone, always keeping it face down and password protected. Jessica's visits became less frequent, and when she did come over, there was an obvious tension in the air. They would exchange meaningful glances when they thought I wasn't looking, and their conversations seemed carefully crafted to avoid any hint of impropriety. Meanwhile, my cryptocurrency portfolio continued its spectacular growth. By June 2021, I had reached $800,000 in my secret account. I was approaching millionaire status while my husband and best friend plotted their future together, assuming I would be left with whatever scraps they decided to give me in a divorce settlement. During this period, I also started researching divorce law and asset protection. I learned that Massachusetts was an equitable distribution state, meaning that assets acquired during marriage were generally split fairly between spouses, though not necessarily equally. Factors like adultery could influence the distribution, but only if properly documented and proven. More importantly, I discovered that assets acquired through individual effort or kept separate during marriage could potentially be protected from division, especially if the other spouse had no knowledge of them and made no contributions to their growth. One evening, while David was out on another suspicious work meeting, I decided to access his computer. I knew his passwords because we had always been open about our digital lives, back when we actually trusted each other. What I found in his email and message history was devastating but strategically valuable. David and Jessica had been carrying on an emotional affair since March, which had become physical in April. Their messages revealed not only their romantic feelings for each other, but also their plans for the future, including their intention to continue their relationship after David divorced me. Most damaging of all were David's messages about our financial situation. He had told Jessica that I was financially naive and dependent on him, that my freelance business was hobby income, and that I would receive a minimal settlement in any divorce because I hadn't contributed significantly to our wealth building. "Sarah has no idea how much we're really worth," he wrote in one message. "She just focuses on her little computer projects and lets me handle the real financial decisions. When we split up, she get enough to be comfortable, but nothing that would threaten our plans." Reading these messages filled me with rage, but also with cold determination. David thought he was manipulating a naive, financially dependent wife. He had no idea that his little computer project's wife was sitting on nearly $1 million in cryptocurrency assets that he couldn't touch. I printed copies of all the relevant messages and emails, creating a comprehensive file of evidence that would prove their affair and David's deception about our financial situation. In July 2021, David finally made his move. He came home one evening with an expression I had learned to recognize as his serious business discussion face. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, sitting down across from me in our living room. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "About our marriage. I think we should consider a trial separation." "A separation?" I managed to sound surprised, even though I had been expecting this conversation for weeks. "We've been growing apart," David continued, using what I now recognized as carefully rehearsed language. "I think some time apart might help us figure out what we really want. Is there someone else?" I asked directly. "No," he lied without hesitation. "This is just about us and what's best for our future." I agreed to the separation, much to David's obvious relief. He had expected arguments, tears, and desperate attempts to save our marriage. Instead, I was calm and reasonable, which seemed to make him slightly suspicious, but mostly grateful. "I'll move in with a friend temporarily," he said. "We can figure out the logistics as we go." "Which friend?" I asked, curious to see if he would lie about this too. "Marcus, from work. He has a spare room." Another lie. I was certain he would be moving in with Jessica, though they would probably be careful to maintain the fiction that they were just friends supporting each other through difficult times. After David moved out, I threw myself into growing my cryptocurrency portfolio with even more intensity. The market was reaching new heights daily, and my holdings were approaching $1.2 million by August 2021. More importantly, I began consulting with Emily Rodriguez, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases and complex financial situations. "I need to understand my options before my husband files for divorce," I told her during our first meeting. "Are you planning to file first?" Emily asked. "I'm not sure yet, but I want to be prepared for any scenario." I explained the general situation, the affair, the separation, the financial dynamics of our marriage, but I didn't mention my cryptocurrency holdings yet. I wanted to understand the legal landscape before revealing my biggest strategic advantage. Emily explained that proving adultery in Massachusetts could influence asset division, but that financial contributions and individual asset ownership were equally important factors. She encouraged me to document any evidence of adultery and to compile a comprehensive picture of our marital assets. "Do you have any separate property or individual investments?" she asked. "Some," I replied carefully. "I'll need to organize those records for our next meeting." By September 2021, Bitcoin had reached $65,000, and my portfolio had exploded to $1.5 million. I was officially a millionaire with wealth that exceeded David's wildest projections for our combined net worth. The irony was exquisite while David planned his new life with Jessica, assuming I would be left financially vulnerable. I was actually building more wealth than he could accumulate in a decade of his corporate salary. David occasionally stopped by the house to pick up more belongings. And these visits became opportunities to gauge his mindset and gather more intelligence about his plans. "How are you managing financially?" he asked during one visit, with what he probably thought was concern but I recognized as calculation. "I'm managing fine," I replied. "My business is actually doing really well." "That's good," he said, though he looked slightly disappointed. I suspect he was hoping I would be struggling, which would make him feel less guilty about abandoning me. "How are things with Marcus?" I asked innocently. "Fine," David replied quickly. "He's a good friend." "I should send him a thank you note for letting you stay there," I suggested, watching David's face carefully. "That's not necessary," David said, a flash of panic crossing his eyes. "He's very private. Doesn't like a lot of social interaction." More lies, but they were becoming useful evidence of his deception. In October, David made the strategic error I had been waiting for. He announced that he wanted to make our separation permanent. "I think we should file for divorce," he said during one of his visits. "We've been apart for 3 months and I don't think we're going to reconcile." "Are you sure?" I asked. "This seems very sudden." "I've been thinking about it a lot," David replied. "I think it's the best thing for both of us. Have you met someone else?" I asked again, giving him another opportunity to tell the truth. "No," he lied again. "This is just about us." I agreed to move forward with divorce proceedings, which seemed to relieve David enormously. He had been worried that I would fight the divorce or make the process difficult. Instead, I was being reasonable and cooperative, which aligned perfectly with his plans. What David didn't realize was that his eagerness to formalize our divorce was about to become the biggest financial mistake of his life. In November 2021, David filed for divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown of marriage. His filing included a comprehensive asset inventory that listed our house, valued at $450,000, our cars, $25,000 combined, our joint savings accounts, $45,000, our individual retirement accounts, $180,000 combined, and various other assets totaling approximately $700,000. According to David's calculations, I would be entitled to roughly $350,000 in assets, enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be truly financially independent. His attorney had clearly advised him that an equitable distribution would favor a roughly even split, particularly since we had no children and both had contributed to our marital assets. What David's asset inventory didn't include, of course, was my cryptocurrency portfolio, which had grown to $1.8 million by the time the divorce papers were filed. Emily Rodriguez reviewed David's filings with great interest. "This is a fairly straightforward asset division," she said, "unless there are hidden assets or complicating factors." "Actually," I said, "there are some complicating factors we need to discuss." I told Emily about my cryptocurrency investments, the timeline, the amounts, the fact that David had actively discouraged these investments and remained unaware of their existence. Emily's eyes widened as I explained the scope of my holdings. "Sarah, you're talking about assets worth more than double your entire marital estate. This changes everything." "How so?" I asked. "Well, first, we need to determine whether these assets are marital property or separate property. Since you acquired them during marriage, there's an argument that they should be subject to division. However, the fact that you funded them entirely from your individual income, that your husband discouraged the investments, and that he has no knowledge of their existence creates a strong case for treating them as separate property." Emily explained that Massachusetts law recognized several categories of separate property, including assets acquired through individual effort that were kept separate from marital finances. The key factors would be the source of funding, the level of involvement by the other spouse, and the intent to keep the assets separate. "The timing is also crucial," Emily continued. "You started these investments before any marital problems and maintained them separately throughout your marriage. This wasn't an attempt to hide assets during divorce proceedings. This was a long-term investment strategy that your husband actively opposed. We developed a 2-phase legal strategy. First, we would present evidence of David's adultery, which would potentially influence the distribution of marital assets in my favor. Second, We would reveal my cryptocurrency holdings and argue for their classification as separate property. This will be a shock to your husband, Emily warned. He's going to feel ambushed, and he'll probably fight hard to claim a portion of those assets. Good, I replied. Let him fight. He's been underestimating me for years. It's time he learned the truth about who he married. The first phase of our strategy unfolded in February 2022, during the initial discovery phase of our divorce proceedings. Emily presented comprehensive evidence of David's affair with Jessica, text messages, emails, photographs, and documentation of their relationship timeline. David's attorney was clearly unprepared for the extent of our evidence. They had expected a routine divorce proceeding based on irreconcilable differences, not a contested case involving adultery claims supported by extensive documentation. During his deposition, David was forced to admit to the affair under oath. His attempts to minimize the relationship and claim it began after our separation were undermined by messages dating back to March 2021, months before he moved out of our house. Mr. Martinez, Emily asked during the deposition, did you tell your wife about your relationship with Ms. Thompson before asking for a separation? No, David admitted reluctantly. Did you tell your wife the real reason you wanted a separation? I told her we were growing apart. But the real reason was that you wanted to be with Ms. Thompson, correct? That was part of it, David conceded. Jessica was also deposed, and her testimony revealed the depth of their deception. They had been planning their future together for months, assuming that I would be cooperative and undemanding in the divorce settlement. Ms. Thompson, Emily asked, did you and Mr. Martinez discuss his financial situation during your relationship? Sometimes, Jessica admitted. Did he tell you how much money he expected to retain after the divorce? He said Sarah would be fine, but that she didn't really understand their finances. Did he tell you that Ms. Martinez was financially naive? Jessica looked uncomfortable. He said she focused on her work and let him handle the money decisions. This testimony was incredibly valuable because it demonstrated David's deliberate deception about my financial sophistication and his assumption that I would be easy to manipulate in divorce proceedings. The adultery evidence shifted the preliminary asset division calculations in my favor. Instead of a 50-50th split, the judge indicated that I could expect to receive 60 to 65% of our marital assets, which would give me approximately $420,000 instead of $350,000. David was clearly frustrated by this development, but he seemed resigned to the financial penalty for his adultery. His attorney advised him to accept the modified distribution and avoid further complications. That's when Emily and I decided to reveal our second surprise. In March 2022, Emily filed an amended financial disclosure on my behalf. The new filing included a detailed inventory of my cryptocurrency holdings, which had stabilized at approximately $2.1 million after the market correction following Bitcoin's peak. The courthouse filing created an immediate sensation. David's attorney called Emily within hours, demanding an explanation for the hidden assets. These aren't hidden assets, Emily replied calmly. These are separate property investments that Ms. Martinez acquired through her individual efforts, using funds from her separate income, against the explicit advice of her husband. David's reaction was explosive. He called me directly, violating his attorney's advice to avoid direct contact during proceedings. Sarah, what the hell is this cryptocurrency thing? He shouted into the phone. $2 million? How is that possible? Hello, David, I replied calmly. Remember Bitcoin? Those worthless digital tokens you told me to avoid? The gambling that you and Jessica laughed about? But when did you? David was struggling to form coherent sentences. I started investing in 2018, right after you told me cryptocurrency was a scam. I've been building this portfolio for over 4 years while you dismissed it as worthless. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded. Because every time I tried to discuss it, you shut me down. You said it was stupid, that I didn't understand real investing, that I should stick to my little computer projects. So I did exactly what you suggested. I focused on my work and let you handle what you thought were the important financial decisions. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Sarah, David finally said, his voice much quieter. We need to talk about this reasonably. This money? It's marital property. We built this together. Actually, David, we didn't build anything together. I built this myself, with my own income, despite your constant discouragement. You wanted nothing to do with cryptocurrency, remember? But I'm your husband. You're my soon-to-be ex-husband who's been sleeping with my best friend for almost a year. And according to your own messages to Jessica, you thought I was financially naive and that I'd be easy to manipulate in the divorce. David hung up without another word. David's attorney immediately filed motions, claiming that my cryptocurrency holdings were marital property subject to equitable distribution. They argued that any assets acquired during marriage, regardless of funding source, should be divided between spouses. Emily was prepared for this challenge. She had spent weeks researching Massachusetts case law regarding separate property claims and digital assets. More importantly, she had David's own words working against him. Your Honor, Emily argued during our court hearing, Mr. Martinez cannot claim an interest in assets that he actively discouraged his wife from acquiring. We have extensive evidence showing that he not only refused to participate in these investments, but actively tried to prevent them. She presented the court with printed copies of David's text messages to Jessica, where he had called my cryptocurrency investments Sarah's gambling problem and worthless digital nonsense. Furthermore, Emily continued, Mr. Martinez has repeatedly characterized his wife's work as supplemental income and positioned himself as the primary financial decision-maker in their marriage. He cannot now claim that assets he knew nothing about and wanted no part of should be considered joint marital property. David's attorney argued that the magnitude of the cryptocurrency gains meant they had to be considered marital assets, regardless of David's initial opposition to the investments. Your Honor, the attorney said, we're talking about over $2 million. This isn't a small personal investment. This represents wealth that could transform both parties' financial futures. Massachusetts law requires equitable distribution of marital assets, and assets of this magnitude cannot be ignored simply because one spouse was initially skeptical. The judge asked several pointed questions about the timeline of my investments, the source of funding, and David's level of knowledge and involvement. Miss Martinez, the judge asked, when you first started these cryptocurrency investments, did you discuss them with your husband? Yes, Your Honor. I tried to explain the technology and the investment opportunity, but he dismissed it as gambling and told me to focus on safer investments. Did you use joint marital funds for these investments? No, Your Honor. I used only income from my freelance business, which was kept in my individual account. Mr. Martinez, the judge turned to David. Were you aware that your wife was making these investments? I knew she was interested in cryptocurrency, David admitted, but I didn't know she was actually investing significant amounts. Did you prohibit her from making these investments? I advised against them, David said carefully. Your Honor, Emily interjected, we have text messages where Mr. Martinez explicitly told his wife that cryptocurrency investments were stupid and that she should stick to what she knows. This wasn't mere advice. This was active discouragement that led Ms. Martinez to pursue these investments independently. The judge took several weeks to consider the complex legal and financial issues involved in the case. While we waited for the judge's decision on the cryptocurrency assets, an unexpected development changed the entire dynamic of our case. Jessica, apparently feeling guilty about her role in the destruction of our marriage, contacted Emily's office and requested to provide additional testimony. Ms. Thompson wants to clarify some aspects of her previous deposition, Emily told me. She says there are things she didn't tell the truth about before. Jessica's new testimony was devastating to David's position. She admitted that David had been actively planning to leave me for months before he asked for a separation. More damaging, she revealed that David had been deliberately deceiving me about our financial situation to ensure I wouldn't fight for a larger share of assets. David told me that Sarah was too trusting and focused on her work to understand their real financial situation. Jessica testified. He said she would accept whatever settlement he offered because she didn't know how to value their assets properly. Did Mr. Martinez ever mention his wife's cryptocurrency investments? Emily asked. He made fun of them constantly, Jessica replied. He called them Sarah's computer game money and said she was wasting her time on nonsense while he built their real wealth. When did you become aware that these investments had significant value? Not until the divorce filings, Jessica admitted. David had no idea either. We both thought Sarah was playing around with small amounts of money. Jessica's testimony also revealed the extent to which David had been manipulating me throughout our marriage, consistently undermining my confidence in financial matters while positioning himself as the family's financial expert. David always told me that Sarah was smart with computers but naive about money, Jessica said. He said she needed someone to protect her from making bad financial decisions. This testimony was particularly powerful because it came from David's own accomplice. Jessica had no incentive to lie in my favor, if anything. Supporting David's claims would have been in her best interest since she was planning a future with him. The judge was clearly influenced by Jessica's admissions. During the next hearing, he made several comments suggesting that David's deception and manipulation had created a situation where traditional marital property rules might not apply. Mr. Martinez, the judge said, it appears that you consistently discouraged your wife from participating in financial decision-making while simultaneously mocking her independent investment choices. Is that accurate? I was trying to protect our financial security, David replied weakly. By keeping your wife ignorant of your family's true financial situation? That's not what I intended, David said. But it is what happened, according to multiple witnesses and your own written communications. In May 2022, Judge Harrison delivered his ruling on our divorce settlement. His decision would become a landmark case in Massachusetts family law regarding separate property claims and digital assets. This case presents unique circumstances, Judge Harrison began. We have a situation where one spouse actively discouraged investments that proved to be extraordinarily profitable, while simultaneously maintaining that the other spouse was financially naive and incapable of making sound investment decisions. The judge ruled that my cryptocurrency holdings would be considered separate property, with 85% remaining under my sole ownership and 15% subject to marital distribution. His reasoning was based on several factors: my exclusive funding of the investments, David's active discouragement of cryptocurrency investing, his lack of knowledge about the extent of my holdings, and his pattern of financial manipulation throughout our marriage. Mr. Martinez cannot claim an interest in assets he actively opposed and knew nothing about, the judge stated. Furthermore, his attempts to maintain financial control over his wife while disparaging her investment acumen demonstrate a pattern of behavior that undermines any claim to these separately maintained assets. The final financial settlement was staggering. My total award, $1.785 million from cryptocurrency assets, plus $420,000 from marital property equals $2.205 million. David's total award, $315,000 from cryptocurrency assets plus $280,000 from marital property equals $595,000. David had expected to retain approximately $350,000 and leave me with a similar amount. Instead, I was walking away with over $2.2 million, while he received less than $600,000. The courtroom was silent as the numbers were read. David's face went completely white, and I saw him grip the table to steady himself. "This is insane," David whispered to his attorney. "She can't take everything." "Mr. Martinez," Judge Harrison said sternly, "your wife didn't take everything. She earned it through investments you explicitly opposed while you were conducting an extramarital affair. You're fortunate to receive any portion of assets you contributed nothing to creating." After the hearing, David cornered me in the courthouse hallway. "Sarah, this isn't fair," he pleaded. "You know I would have supported your investments if I had understood their potential." "Would you, David?" I replied calmly. "Because I have years of messages where you called my work worthless and my investments stupid. You had plenty of opportunities to support me, but you chose to tear me down instead." "What about Jessica and me?" he asked desperately. "We were planning a future together." "Then you should have planned better," I said. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before betraying someone who's building wealth you can't even imagine." I walked away, leaving David standing alone in the courthouse corridor, finally understanding the true cost of his betrayal. The months following our divorce brought a series of unexpected developments that highlighted just how drastically the power dynamics had shifted. David and Jessica's relationship, which had seemed so passionate and certain during their affair, began to crumble under the weight of financial reality. Jessica had been attracted to David's confidence and apparent financial success. When she learned that I would be leaving the marriage with over $2 million while David retained less than $600,000, her enthusiasm for their future together cooled considerably. "I had no idea Sarah was so wealthy," Jessica confessed to a mutual friend, who later shared the conversation with me. David always made it sound like he was the successful one and she was just playing with computers. Their relationship became increasingly strained as David struggled with the financial and emotional aftermath of our divorce. He had to sell our house to provide my share of the marital assets, and he moved into a small apartment that was a far cry from the lifestyle he had envisioned with Jessica. Meanwhile, my newfound wealth opened doors I had never imagined. I paid cash for a beautiful penthouse apartment in downtown Boston, started my own technology consulting firm, and began making strategic investments in promising startups. The cryptocurrency market continued its volatile journey, but my portfolio remained robust because I had diversified into multiple asset classes using my divorce settlement. By early 2023, my net worth had grown to over $3 million. More importantly, I had gained something that couldn't be measured in dollars: complete financial independence and the confidence that comes from proving your own worth despite others' doubts. In June 2022, David reached out to me through his attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss post-divorce matters. Against Emily's advice, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop near the courthouse where our divorce had been finalized. David looked terrible. He had lost weight, his usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The confident, charismatic man I had married was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "Sarah," he began, his voice shaky. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Financial trouble. The divorce settlement left me with debt I can't handle, and Jessica left me." "She left you?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Last month. She said she couldn't handle the financial stress and that she had misunderstood our situation." David's voice was bitter. "Turns out she was more interested in my money than in me." I felt a mixture of sympathy and vindication. David was experiencing the same betrayal I had felt, but without the financial resources to cushion the blow. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything he had done, I didn't enjoy seeing him in pain. "Sarah, I know this is crazy, but is there any chance? Could we try again? I realize now how wrong I was about everything. About you, about money, about what really matters." I stared at him in disbelief. "David, you cheated on me with my best friend. You lied to me for months. You tried to manipulate me in our divorce because you thought I was too stupid to protect myself. And now you want to get back together because your affair partner left you when she realized you weren't as wealthy as she thought." "I know how it sounds," David said desperately, "but I've learned from my mistakes. I see now how incredible you are, how wrong I was to underestimate you. You don't want me back because you've learned to appreciate me," I replied. "You want me back because I have money and you don't." David started to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. "David, I spent 12 years of my life trying to earn your respect and recognition. I built a business, made smart investments, and tried to contribute to our partnership, but you consistently dismissed my efforts as unimportant. Now that you know my little computer projects made me wealthy, suddenly you think I'm incredible? That's not fair," David said weakly. "What's not fair is that it took losing $2 million for you to realize you might have underestimated your wife." I stood up to leave, but David grabbed my arm. "Please, Sarah, I'm begging you." "I have nowhere else to turn." "David," I said gently but firmly, "I forgive you for what you did to our marriage. I even understand why you did it. You were unhappy and you thought Jessica offered you something I couldn't. But I will never go back to being the woman who needed your approval to feel valuable. I left him sitting alone in the coffee shop and I never looked back. By the fall of 2022, I had fully embraced my new identity as a successful entrepreneur and investor. My technology consulting firm, Martinez Tech Solutions, was thriving with contracts from major corporations who valued my expertise in blockchain technology and digital transformation. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same companies were now paying me six-figure consulting fees for the same knowledge that David had dismissed as worthless just 2 years earlier. I also began investing in other women-led startups, particularly those founded by women who had been underestimated or overlooked by traditional investors. My first major investment was in a fintech company founded by two female MIT graduates, who were building cryptocurrency investment tools for beginners. We want to make digital assets accessible to people who were told they were too complicated or risky, explained Sarah Chen, the company's CEO. Especially women who have been discouraged from investing by partners or financial advisors, who assume they don't understand technology. Her mission resonated deeply with me, and I invested $500,000 in their Series A round. The company, Crypto Simplified, went on to become one of the fastest-growing fintech startups of 2023. In November 2022, I received an unexpected phone call from Jessica. She had gotten my number from a mutual friend and wanted to meet in person to apologize. We met at a small restaurant in Cambridge, far from the places where we used to spend time together as friends. Jessica looked as uncomfortable as I felt, but I was curious to hear what she had to say. "Sarah," she began, "I owe you an enormous apology. What I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know how sorry I am." "What happened between you and David?" I asked. "We broke up 3 months ago," Jessica replied. I realized that I had been attracted to the idea of David's success more than to David himself. When I learned about your cryptocurrency investments and saw how the divorce settlement turned out, I understood that I had destroyed a 15-year friendship for someone who wasn't even the person I thought he was. "David told me you left him because of financial stress," I said. "That's partially true," Jessica admitted. "But it was more than that. David became obsessed with your wealth, constantly talking about how unfair the settlement was and how you had somehow tricked him. He couldn't accept that you had been more successful than he was, and his resentment was toxic." Jessica paused, then continued. "I also realized that if David could lie to and betray you so easily, he would eventually do the same thing to me. I lost my best friend for a man who wasn't worth it." "Jessica," I said carefully, "I appreciate your apology, but I need you to understand that our friendship can never be what it was. You didn't just have an affair with my husband, you helped him plan our divorce while pretending to be my friend. That level of betrayal isn't something I can just move past." "I understand," Jessica said, tears forming in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. You were the best friend I ever had, and I threw it away for something that was never real." After Jessica left, I felt a strange sense of closure. Her apology didn't change what had happened, but it confirmed what I had suspected, that David and Jessica's relationship had been built on deception and greed rather than genuine love. In early 2023, I met Michael Zhang at a technology conference in San Francisco. He was the CTO of a major blockchain development company, and we connected over our shared passion for cryptocurrency technology and digital innovation. Michael was everything David wasn't genuinely interested in my work, impressed by my business acumen, and secure enough in his own success to celebrate mine without feeling threatened. He had built his own company from the ground up and understood the dedication and vision required to succeed in the technology industry. "I've been following your consulting firm's work," he told me over dinner during the conference. "Your blockchain implementation for that banking consortium was brilliant. How did you convince traditional financial institutions to embrace such cutting-edge technology?" It was refreshing to have a conversation with someone who understood and valued my professional expertise. David had never asked detailed questions about my work or shown genuine interest in my achievements. Michael and I began a long-distance relationship that quickly deepened into something serious. He flew to Boston monthly, and I made regular trips to San Francisco. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine appreciation for each other's accomplishments. "You're not what I expected," Michael told me one evening as we walked along San Francisco Bay. "What did you expect?" I asked. "Someone who had been hurt by divorce to be more cynical, more guarded, but you seemed genuinely happy and confident." "Divorce was the best thing that ever happened to me," I replied. "It forced me to discover who I really was underneath all the self-doubt that my marriage had created." By summer 2023, my net worth had grown to $4.2 million through continued cryptocurrency gains, successful business investments, and the growth of my consulting firm. More importantly, I had built a life that was authentically mine, surrounded by people who valued and respected me. In August, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Martha's Vineyard. Unlike my first marriage, which had been built on compatibility and compromise, this relationship was founded on genuine partnership and mutual admiration. "I want to spend my life with someone who challenges me to be better," Michael said as he proposed. "Someone who builds empires while others are making excuses." I said yes without hesitation. In September 2023, I received a letter from David. It was handwritten, which surprised me since David had always preferred digital communication. "Dear Sarah," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I don't expect a response. But I needed to tell you something that I should have said a long time ago. You were right about everything. You were right about cryptocurrency. You were right about your business potential. You were right about my attitude toward your work and your ideas. Most importantly, you were right that I didn't appreciate what I had until it was gone. I've spent the past year thinking about our marriage and trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could betray someone I loved. I realize now that I was threatened by your intelligence and your independence, even though those were the qualities that made me fall in love with you in the first place. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to try to get you back. I know that ship has sailed, and frankly, you deserve someone much better than the man I was when we were married. I'm writing because I want you to know that your success hasn't gone unnoticed, and I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. I heard about your engagement to Michael Jen. I looked him up, and he seems like an impressive person who will appreciate you in ways I never did. I hope you'll be very happy together. I also want you to know that I've started seeing a therapist to work on the insecurity and manipulation that destroyed our marriage. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I'm trying to become a better person so I don't hurt anyone else the way I hurt you. Thank you for showing me what real strength and intelligence look like. I'm sorry it took losing you for me to understand what I had. With genuine remorse and respect, David." I read the letter twice, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was no request for money, no attempt at manipulation, no self-pity, just what seemed like genuine accountability and growth. I showed the letter to Michael, who read it thoughtfully. "How does it make you feel?" he asked. "Sad," I replied honestly. Sad that it took him so long to understand these things, and sad that our marriage might have worked if he had been capable of this kind of self-reflection years ago. "Do you regret how things turned out?" Michael asked. "Not for a second," I said without hesitation. If David hadn't betrayed me, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have spent my whole life seeking his approval instead of building my own success. I never responded to David's letter, but I kept it as a reminder of how far I had come. In October 2023, I was invited to speak at the Women in Technology Leadership Summit in Boston. The conference brought together successful female entrepreneurs, investors, and executives to share their stories and inspire the next generation of women in technology. My keynote speech was titled, "From Underestimated to Unstoppable: How Betrayal Became My Greatest Business Advantage." Standing before an audience of 500 successful women, I told my story: the dismissive husband, the secret cryptocurrency investments, the betrayal and divorce, and the ultimate vindication of my business instincts and investment choices. 5 years ago, I concluded, my husband told me that my cryptocurrency investments were worthless and that I should stick to what I knew. Today, those worthless investments have made me financially independent, funded my consulting firm, and allowed me to invest in dozens of other women-led startups. The greatest gift my ex-husband gave me wasn't his approval, it was his dismissal. When he stopped believing in me, I was forced to believe in myself. When he underestimated me, I learned to trust my own judgment. When he tried to control my financial decisions, I discovered the power of financial independence. Ladies, if someone in your life is telling you that your ideas are worthless, your instincts are wrong, or your ambitions are unrealistic, consider the possibility that they're the one who doesn't understand the situation. Sometimes the people who claim to know what's best for us are simply protecting their own insecurity and maintaining their own power. Trust yourself. Invest in yourself. Build wealth that no one can take away from you. And remember that the best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. The audience gave me a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After my speech, dozens of women approached me to share their own stories of being underestimated and dismissed by partners, families, and colleagues who couldn't recognize their potential. That evening, as I celebrated with Michael and some of the other conference speakers, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. By the end of 2023, my net worth had reached $5.8 million, and I decided it was time to formalize my commitment to supporting other underestimated women. I established the Martinez Foundation for Women's Financial Independence, with an initial funding of $1 million. The foundation provided microloans, investment education, and mentorship to women who wanted to start businesses or make investments, but lacked access to traditional funding sources or financial education. Too many women are told they don't understand money or investing. I explained to the local business journal that covered the foundation's launch. We want to change that narrative by providing education, resources, and capital to women who are ready to take control of their financial futures. Our first major initiative was a cryptocurrency education program for women, teaching the basics of digital asset investing to participants who had been intimidated or discouraged from entering the market. 5 years ago, I was told that cryptocurrency was too risky and complicated for me to understand. I told the first class of participants. Today, those investments have created wealth that transformed my life. I want to make sure other women have access to the same opportunities, without having to overcome the same barriers. The program was overwhelmingly successful, with participants going on to make their own successful cryptocurrency investments and sharing their knowledge with friends and family members. Michael and I were married in May 2024, in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Big Sur, California. Unlike my first wedding, which had been about conforming to expectations and building a conventional life, this celebration was about two successful, independent people choosing to build something together. This time, I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I told my maid of honor, my new friend and business partner Sarah Chen from Crypto Simplified. I'm whole on my own. I'm marrying Michael because our partnership makes both of us stronger and happier. My wedding vows reflected this philosophy. Michael, I promise to support your dreams without sacrificing my own, to celebrate your successes without diminishing my achievements, and to build a partnership based on mutual respect and shared ambition. After our honeymoon, Michael relocated his company's headquarters to Boston, and we bought a beautiful home in Beacon Hill that we purchased together as equal partners. I love that we're both bringing assets and success to this marriage, Michael said as we signed the closing papers. There's no power imbalance, no financial dependence. We're building something new together from a position of strength. By our first anniversary, our combined net worth had exceeded $12 million. As both our companies continued to grow and our investment portfolios flourished. In June 2025, exactly 3 years after our divorce was finalized, I encountered David at a business networking event in downtown Boston. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, more tired, but somehow more at peace than when I had last seen him. He approached me hesitantly during the cocktail reception. Sarah, he said quietly, congratulations on your marriage and your continued success. I've been following your company's growth in the business journals. Thank you, I replied politely. How are you doing? Better, he said honestly. I'm working for a smaller marketing firm now, nothing glamorous, but I enjoy the work. I've been in therapy for 2 years, and I'm finally understanding the damage I caused to both of us. I'm glad you're doing well, I said, and I meant it. Sarah, David continued, I know this might sound strange, but I want to thank you. Thank me? I was genuinely surprised. For not giving up on yourself when I tried to diminish you. For building something incredible despite my attempts to hold you back. Watching your success from a distance has taught me more about strength and resilience than anything else in my life. David paused, then added, I also want to thank you for showing me what I was really like as a husband. I remarried last year. Someone completely different from both you and Jessica, and I'm a much better partner now because I understand the mistakes I made with you. I'm happy for you, I said, surprised to discover that I genuinely was. The irony, David said with a rueful smile, is that you became everything I claimed you could never be, while I had to completely rebuild myself just to become worthy of a basic relationship. David, I said gently, we were both different people then. I'm not angry anymore, and I hope you're not either. No anger, David confirmed. Just gratitude that you found your way to the success you deserved, and regret that I couldn't be the partner who celebrated that journey with you. As David walked away, I felt a sense of complete closure. The man who had once made me question my own worth now saw clearly who I had always been capable of becoming. Today, as I write this story, I'm 36 years old with a net worth of $8.7 million. My consulting firm employs 15 people and has contracts with Fortune 500 companies across 3 continents. My foundation has helped over 200 women start businesses or begin investing. My marriage to Michael is built on genuine partnership and mutual respect. Most importantly, I wake up every morning knowing exactly who I am and what I'm capable of achieving. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me actually saved me. When David and Jessica took away my illusions about unconditional love and loyal friendship, they forced me to find strength I didn't know I possessed. When David tried to convince me I was financially naive, I proved I could build wealth beyond his imagination. When they both underestimated me, I learned to trust my own judgment completely. If you're watching this and you're in a relationship where someone consistently dismisses your ideas, minimizes your achievements, or makes you doubt your own capabilities, I want you to understand something. Their lack of vision doesn't limit your potential. The people who love and support you will celebrate your success, not feel threatened by it. They will encourage your biggest dreams, not try to make them smaller to fit their comfort zone. They will trust your judgment, not position themselves as the expert on your own life. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are when your success exceeds their expectations. David and Jessica did that for me, and I'm grateful. My cryptocurrency investments, which started as $3,000 worth of tokens that David called worthless, are now worth over $4 million. My consulting firm, built on the technical expertise David dismissed as computer stuff, generates 7 figures in annual revenue. My foundation, funded by the wealth David said I'd never be capable of creating, is changing women's lives across the country. But the most valuable thing I gained wasn't money. It was the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am, with or without anyone else's approval or support. To everyone watching who has ever been told they're not smart enough, capable enough, or worthy enough, they're wrong. Trust yourself. Invest in yourself. Build something that no one can take away from you. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong about you. It's proving yourself right. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building the life you deserve. The greatest victory isn't winning against those who underestimated you. It's becoming so successful that their opinions become irrelevant.